If you're looking for a beautiful PowerPoint slide there, you look in the wrong direction. Look here. High definition, zero distortion. Crystal clear. What else can you ask for? Well, let me introduce myself to you a bit. I guess the best way to do that is to say that I'm a C. Well, my name, as you know, is CY. And a lot of times people ask me, how do you spell that? It makes about as much sense as asking how do you spell OMF. There have been times when I had to kind of come up with an answer for that question. And I would say, okay, listen, this is how I spell my name. S-E-E-W-H-Y. And now you see why I'm called CY. Ethnically, I'm Chinese, another C. I've also spent the last 24 years of my life in Canada, a C again. So I'm kind of like a hybrid, a fusion. So call me a Canadian if you want. I've spent about 20 years in English ministry in Chinese churches in Toronto. So I constantly live in between two worlds. I've got a twilight zone of my own. And sometimes I find myself confused. Sometimes I find myself confusing. So if you ask me, I would say I'm a true descendant of Confucius. Another C again. I'm also a Christian, obviously, and that's the C that I'm most proud of. My dad was also a C. He was a seaman by trade, which was a blessing to the family. Back in his days, the average seaman got paid a little bit more than the average person on the street. And so growing up, I've never had to worry about a roof over my head or food on the table. My dad didn't come home very often, but whenever he did, the whole family would be going out, checking out these restaurants and fun places and whatnot. So life was good until I was about 10. Out of nowhere, my mom got a letter from an anonymous person. And the letter basically says that my dad has got another family, another wife in Taiwan. It came as a devastating blow to my mom, and she became a very different person. Two incidents still sticks out to me, even to this very day. The first one was when I was writing a letter to my dad. It was before the time of emails, Skypes, and whatnot. So I was writing a letter to him. My mom was sitting right next to me. And she would force me to put in words designed to hurt my dad. And of course, it's more powerful coming from the kid. Another incident. One time, Dad was home for just a few short days. Everyone was in bed. All of a sudden, we heard noises coming from the kitchen. So we all woke up, we rushed to the kitchen, only to see that my mom was wielding one of those Chinese cleavers, you know, the kitchen knives, at my dad. To this very day, that still haunts me. Little did I know that I became a different person too. One time I was walking into the classroom with a bit of smile on my face. My high school teacher noticed that. She looked at me and she said to the rest of the class, "Here comes CY with a smile on his face for a change." And I noticed that I have not been smiling for a long time. I was pretty close to my biggest brother, and between the two of us, we often rehearsed and fed into each other's anger. And we would be saying how life would have been different for us had we been born into a different family. In the few years that followed, I started going to church. I've been hearing all these things about Jesus Christ, the cross, and how he died for all of us. They didn't make any sense to me. To me at the time, if anyone needed that, it would have been my parents, not me. One time, a counselor came up to me. By then, he's earned enough trust from me. And he asked me to share my story with him, which I did. He patiently listened. And towards the end, he said, "Yeah, it's not fair for you that you have to go through all of these at such a young age. But have you thought about your parents? Their situation is bad enough as it is. And you, as the kid, you have not been helping at all. If anything, you've been adding to their problem, their sorrow, and their grief." I was 16 going on 17, and had to admit that he was right. The whole time, I've been capitalizing on the situation and blaming them for my own problems. It was at that point that I realized that it's me who needed Jesus Christ, his cross, and his forgiveness. Fast forward about 10 years, I became a married guy, moved to Canada, and my wife was pregnant with our first kid. My dad was retired by then. Being the good Asian parents that they tried to be, they flew over to Canada to help us a little bit. You noticed that, right? They weren't helping at all. They were still fighting like crazy. I remember one morning, I was driving to the church, and they had to come with me because they didn't drive. I had them in my back road, and out of nowhere, they started picking a fight again. I was going to become a dad, and my plate was full. I didn't need that. And so I basically just threw up my hands and said to the Lord, "I've had it. You take care of this." Guess what? He did. That very morning. We walked into the church. My dad and my mom, they were fighting so bad. My dad was sitting here. My mom was sitting over there. They couldn't be farther away. And out of nowhere, my pastor at the time, he spoke a gospel message. It wasn't even a gospel Sunday. I'm a pastor now, so my hunch is that he probably got so busy the week before that he decided to recycle one of his canned messages. I know how these things go. Towards the end, he gave an invitation. And being the good Christian that I was, I closed my eyes and joined the others in prayer. By the time I opened my eyes, the usher came and tapped me on my shoulder. He said, "Did you know that your dad and your mom, they raised their hands at the same time?" And I went like, "What?" What I called the end, God called the beginning. Now, things didn't turn around overnight. They were still fighting like crazy to the day they left Canada. But while they were in Hong Kong, one day my dad said to my mom, he said, "Whatever has happened, has happened. We're new beings now. The old is gone. The new has come." Like coming from my dad. Not particularly educated, pretty young as a Christian, exposed to Bible study maybe 1 or 2 times at that point. Like, it's almost straight from 2 Corinthians 5:17. My bet is that probably wasn't the first time he tried to make peace with my mom. But that one time, my mom heard it. And that's what he went on to do. Shortly after, my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer. Small wonder, He had been a chain smoker for all of his life. What typical of seamen in those days. Some of you here are medical professionals, and you know that lung cancer is something that, by the time it's diagnosed, is almost always too late. The doctor gave him 6 months to live. By the Lord's grace, he lived on for about 2 years. The last 2 years of his life, it was like a second honeymoon to him. He would be going out with my mom every day and checking out these places. And they weren't well off, so they just stayed in Hong Kong. But they were dating almost every single day. He passed away as a C, a Christian, with no regrets at all. Praise the Lord. Fast forward again, year 2005, I took my family on a short-term missions trip, and as part of the preparation, I was given a book to read, and the book happens to be Back to Jerusalem. I know the movement is kind of controversial. It's also been abused in the past, but at that time, I was still very touched. It started with a whole bunch of Chinese pastors. They were reading Acts 1:8, and it says, "You will be my witnesses in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." It's the last bit that they were scratching their heads over. Like, the earth is round. Where's the end of the earth? And then they figure, a circle ends where it starts. And so the gospel has to be taken back to Jerusalem, where it started. They didn't feel ready to send out missionaries to Jerusalem and the places around. It's that part of the world we now call 1040 window, where there is a staunch Muslim and Buddhist influence. But they noticed that there are minority people groups all along the Silk Road in mainland China. And so they sent out a delegate to the northwestern part of China. Even before they had a chance to start the ministry there, cultural revolution broke out. I remember the story of one young mother. She was pregnant when she was there. She was put in jail. The baby came out, and the authorities came to her, and they said, "I know you love your kid, and your kid needs a mom too. The moment you come out renouncing Christ, we'll set you free." And that's the one thing she refused to do. She got kept in jail, and when she came out, her kid was a bit grown up. The first thing she tried to do was to reunite with him. But during those years, the kid has very quickly learned that the way to survive in that kind of political climate is to draw a clear line with the mom. I've got nothing to do with her. I had tears in my eye when I read that. At the back of my mind, I was also thinking about the Christian-Muslim conflict. I truly believe that the ultimate solution to that is not more violence, not more bloodshed, not gunpowder, but a radical shift from a hate-based faith system to a love-based one. And so I started making inquiries with agencies to see if I can go to northwestern China. The first agency I checked out happened to be OMF. For some wonderful odd reason, they decided to send me to another agency. And they thought they've got rid of me once and for all. So in the few years that followed, I developed a good relationship with two other agencies. Year 2012, I went into ministry transition, and I took advantage of the gap to do a few things that the Lord has always laid in my heart to do. One of them being perspectives. I worked with two other Chinese pastors in Toronto to put out the first ever Cantonese course worldwide for perspectives, and it didn't happen in Guangdong, didn't happen in Hong Kong, happened in Toronto, so go figure. But in the process, I got close to the OMF leadership again. It was also around the time when John Fowler was about to come, and he was looking at restructuring the leadership team. He was looking for someone to fill the role of Ontario Regional Director, and I felt humbled when the leadership came to me and asked if I would consider journeying with them together. The rest of it is history, as they say. And that's what took me to OC here. I find it interesting that instead of being a frontline missionary, God has got a different plan for me. He's given me the privilege to partner with Him and become a missionary maker. And I praise the Lord for that.